Welcome to Altadena After the Fire. This is your host, Colby Colb, as we chronicle the post-fire situation in Altadena and Pasadena in California. And a few episodes ago, we had on a gentleman by the name of James Farr, who was talking about the aftermath of the fire when it happened. And James Farr is a radio host in Los Angeles and our partner, KBLA. He is also a contributor to the LA Progressive. And he has a new show on a radio program called Conversation Live, Altadena Rising, where he does something similar to what we're doing with this podcast. And I wanted to get you on, James, to talk a little bit about, just sort of an update from your perspective, because you're literally on the front lines of what is going on in Altadena. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Colby, for having me today. I'm looking forward to. I love the podcast, man. You're doing an amazing job. It's gripping, it's entertaining, it's informative. So thank you and your entire network for spreading this story and making sure it stays in the given the attention that it needs and certainly deserves.
So, James, talk a little about your connection to Altadena. You're a Californian, so you've lived your whole life in the state of California, and you now live in the Los Angeles area. Tell us about Altadena and just a little bit about the community, not even about the fire, but just the community in general.
We've kind of talked about it like if Wakanda were a real place, there would be a section of it called Altadena. It's just this culture is special, right? I joke with people. I've lived in the community for about 25 years. And I joke that I have to fill out visa paperwork every year because it's a very tribal community, right? Like they love hard, they fight hard, they're resilient people, their roots are strong. But it's one of those, a typical small town Black America where the connections from one family to another, the streets that people live on, the schools that they attended, the churches that they worshiped, the recreational centers and parks that, they played at once as children, all connects through youth sports and all it's this cool thing, right? Like, Colby, if you ever went there when it was how we would remember it, you'd say, I've found the Blackness in Southern California that doesn't give you all of the grit and hustle of maybe living in South Los Angeles or maybe even the South Bay. It's a beautiful place in the mountains, foothills rather.
So there is this awful fire, which over the years, just from my first episode when I spoke to Tawala, who's a lifelong Altadena resident, he was like, we never, ever worried about a fire. Like, we would just be like, oh, okay, yeah, it might be some smoke. But like where this community was situated, nobody really feared that a fire would overtake them. And so a lot of people weren't even insured or had the right setup in their homes to protect them from a fire. We're now, several months into the recovery. Give us a little update on just what's going on and how people are doing.
Well, how people are doing now, you'll hear a lot of energy, right, and inner strength from Altadenians, right, that they will recover, they will bounce back, they will rebuild. Right now, I think people are still in a state of shock. The spirit is strong, but the grief and the reality that folks are still in a space of relief, right? They need resources, right? As folks are settling into what is, for many, an uncomfortable new normal, the things that you and I may take for granted, our favorite bodega, our favorite coffee shop, our favorite, wherever it is that we go, commuting to church may look different, right? Having to shuttle kids across LA freeways to get them to their activities and schools. That's a reality that many people right now are having to adjust to. For some, it's extremely difficult. For some, it's expensive and becoming a financial burden when you kind of add, gas out here, bruh, is $6 a gallon, right? So when you start look like in total looking at how all of this additional cost, things that they otherwise wouldn't have needed. The old spoon that you use to make the cake with, right? You don't have it anymore. I mean, so there's kind of things that you and I, or folks who have our things, and I say them as things, but for them, they're their utilities, their tools, they're things that made their house and their life function, right? That flashlight that was up in the cabinet, right?
It's your personal comfort.
It's your personal comfort. So they're having to adjust to that.
Where are people going? So, like, it's about 22,000 people have been displaced. Where are they temporarily living? And then I know when I spoke to Tawala a few weeks ago, he was like, our house survived, but we can't even stay there. And 60 Minutes just did a story last week about it. And a woman was basically in the same boat. Only house survived. And she's like, it literally cooked her house. And so she can't really, the smell, the chemicals, and it probably needs to be, the house probably needs to be torn down because, and then, the ground, I remember you on the second episode, talking about the ground itself and getting the earth out that may be contaminated. So it's going to be a while before there's another community there, people living there. So where did they go and where are they living and what kind of situations are people in right now?
There are probably three categories that you can put them in. They're wherever they can be. They are wherever they are, but they all want to be back home, right? And so people are having to disperse to wherever they could be sheltered. There are some that are not as fortunate that they have either family that they can stay with. Some are unhoused in their cars. There's a slow trickle of support. And again, it's, as you said, 22,000. There's 2.8 residents per household in Altadena. Typically, Black and brown folks don't participate in census or are undercounted, right? So when you look at these multi-generational homes, I know houses where there's 6 people, and then there's a back house where 3 more people live. So it may be a little bit more than the 22,000, but right now there is no way or no official way that those who have been displaced are actually tracked. So there's no real number. We believe, we guess, we hope, we're looking for, but people have had to go wherever they can just to establish some normalcy. If you don't have insurance, right? And let's say you do have insurance, that extended living assistance, that's going to run out at some point. Rent around here is $6,000 and up, so it's a cost prohibitive a situation, a serious burden that people are facing.
Well, it's one of the most expensive places to live in America, much less the world. And to own a piece of property, for many of those families that own property, it was great that they own that property. But if that property is eliminated, it's not easy to just go and get $1 million and build a new house. It's not easy. Like it's almost impossible, right? And especially with the way the economy is right now. So what type of programs have been helping people? Like what are some of the things you're hearing about the rebuilding of the community?
Well, obviously, the first thing is folks had to check with their insurance. If they had insurance, that was their first stop. And then there was the resources that FEMA is making available. If you applied for FEMA early and you didn't have insurance, it's just such a different individual situation, right? There's no light switch. There's no kind of umbrella solution, and people are in a similar situation, but it's very unique. So FEMA can make available to you between 2 different funding sources or grants, almost $100,000, right? But again, that's not going to get you very, very far. Other than that, there are organizations like the Brotherhood Crusade. There are local organizations here in our community that are working to provide relief, right? People in the immediate aftermath of the fire, people didn't have IDs, they didn't have bank cards, they couldn't buy a soda pop, right? So it was kind of that practical things that folks need. And then they needed their dignity restored. They didn't want to have to, kind of shuffle through clothes thrown on the ground to kind of help get them back to where they are to
your
being whole.
Vehicle. Nobody really talks about that, but a lot of people lost their house and their car.
Their house, that's their second car. Their third car, the car that had just been sitting in the garage. Yeah, there's a lot of the totality of the damage, Brother Colby. I was able to go on three tours, excuse me, with first responders, law enforcement, and the immediate aftermath and the science of this fire makes absolutely no sense. The level of destruction. I've never seen anything like this. People talk about a war environment. I've never been to war. I don't know what bombing looks like, but I know what 10, 12 blocks in any direction gone looks like. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. Listen, I talk about this every day with people because it's just every community in the country for our people, there is an Altadena. There is every community. There's a community just like Altadena, and you have to put yourself in your community and imagine everything is that you've known has been wiped out, especially a community that was the only place where you could buy a house. And so there's a lot of legacy that we're talking about there. And then we all know about the vultures, which is going into the next question. What are you hearing about rebuilding and properties being sold and folks just, not being able to survive? And then these vultures that are sitting out there plotting on that land because it is prime real estate in the Los Angeles area.
It absolutely is prime real estate. I think the first thing your audience should be informed on, Colby, is that it's not really their business to opine or kind of insert what they would do when they've lost nothing, right?
Yeah.
I think people should be afforded the space, the grace to make a very individual financial decision, right? You're an elder, you may not have 10 years, 15 years to wait for a community that you knew for the last 60 years to return. It's not going to return in the same way, right? The community was destroyed. It wasn't broken or fractured. It was destroyed. And so that there is a rebuilding process. So allow people to make those decisions. But to your question, yes, there are predatory capitalists here. There are disaster capitalism here. There's predatory speculators and things in the community. The tax assessor has taken measures that if folks are trying to access people's deeds and other tax records or property records, that they've kind of flagged things. What activity wasn't happening before January 7th. Let's look a little bit closer after January 7th. But some are choosing, which may be the best choice for them, is to sell their land and take the insurance money that they have available to them. I know of an elder man who got close to $2 million. He was 78, 77 years old. That's a different decision than perhaps someone 40-year old
Right.
who may be able to wait. And he needed to be housed now and not in a 2-bedroom apartment or as an Air C&C or whatever he was calling it, the Airbnb model, right? He wasn't used. Can you imagine the trauma, right, of an elder having a kid in an apartment upstairs, jumping on the floor? Like, these are real life situations that people are having to navigate through. So I would just encourage people to give the folks the space. Y'all shouldn't be selling. That's not your decision to make. It's an individual one.
Are there any plans that you're hearing infrastructure wise? I mean, is it the whole area going to come back the same, or are they going to be building stuff differently? What about the actual infrastructure itself? Are there plans to fix it, like the power and the water and all the other things that you need in the community? What are you hearing? And what's the latest?
The legislation is already there that would allow these utility companies to go underground. Now, will that happen in our lifetime? I don't know. The desire is there for people to build back. It's questionable if they will allow these wooden kind of frame homes to go back into this area. How much of that will require some level of fire retardants? Will sprinkler systems be required in some of these homes, like commercial sprinkler systems, like you would have in an office in a commercial building? There's still right now the debris cleanup that has to happen. There's maybe 1,000 properties that have been serviced we're now almost about coming up on 100 days after the fire. Then there's the remediation process where that first they have to move the debris, then they have to level everything, right? They have to dig out the concrete, the foundation, then start a remediation process of the soil. And so it's going to be quite a long time before anyone sees anything that may look like what was normal.
You do a show on our partner station, KBLA in Los Angeles, Tavis Smiley's station, called Conversation Live Altadena Rising. Talk a little bit about this weekly show and what are some of the things that you have learned in the last few weeks of this show airing?
Sure. Conversation Live, Altadena Rising. We are self-appointed as a show of record, and we are chronicling this for the nation. And so I really want to focus on the roots, the resilience, the rebuilding, and the reunion. And kind of in, if you will, kind of episodically as an arc, right? We want to really show people or allow people to hear who Altadena is and what that community means. That's the roots portion of it. The resilience is just what we've talked about earlier, just the tenacity and community and how folks move in this community. The rebuilding is going to be much more of a journey, and as we're documenting, and obviously folks are looking to reunite. What I've learned, and now 4 episodes, I've had the Black Attorney General, Attorney Ben Crump, on the show. I've had the president of the Altadena Historical Society. I've talked to impacted people. Outside of the show, I've interviewed over 100 people just documenting and getting sound since the fire to really kind of understand what's going on. What seems to be a through line in all of these shows is that people are in shock. The utility company, Southern California Edison, appears to be responsible for this fire. People need relief, and people are still trying to figure out what's next in life for them.
Yeah.
That's what we've learned in the first few weeks, first 4 or 5 episodes.
Will there be any accountability for the power company? I mean, how does that work? Are they insured? I mean, because this happened, wasn't that the reason for that other fire in California a few years ago that wiped out that small town?
Sure,
It was about
yeah.
the power company. How was that handled in regards to the power company?
Right. So there's legislation that says when the winds kick up to this force, right? These were hurricane force winds, that the utility company should have de-energized the lines, and the system was overloaded. There was a malfunction probably 10 miles away from where the fire actually started in the Eaton Canyon area. Once that malfunction happened, those transformers blew up. It ignited a brush fire in the hills. The area that burned hadn't burned in over 30 years. This time last year, we had torrential rain. I mean, a huge rainstorm. So it was fueled perfectly along with those 100-mile-an-hour winds. The ember spray spread out. To the question of accountability, what we'd like to see happen, although no one will go to jail, but what will likely happen is the district attorney or the state attorney general will press charges against Southern California Edison as a corporation. The fortunate thing is because there will be lawsuits, there are already lawsuits, folks will eventually be able to receive some sort of compensation, but that could be 5, 10, 15 years off, and before that is actually made whole. So,
and is that a public utility or is that a private company?
Well, it's so interesting. They're a private company, but obviously they provide a public utility, right? So right. It's, but they can be held accountable for what appears to be their negligence. There's 18 people that perished in that fire in Altadena.
Yeah. Man, it's just infuriating, man. Every time I hear this, it's just, you get to really understand the depth of bureaucracy in every aspect of American life. And you're really on your own when something happens. And we cannot forget these people. Like I just, even the smallest things, and thank you to the Brotherhood Crusade who we partnered with to help raise funds, and we continue to raise funds for them. But I also implore anybody that's listening that can afford it, that is financially free, to maybe adopt some families and help some families through the process. There's a lot of families going through the struggle right now. And if there's any way that you could help because you have the financial resources, that would be, much appreciated. James, I appreciate you for taking some time to check in with us, and your show airs on KBLA, our partner in Los Angeles, Saturdays at 10 a.m. and Sundays at noon Pacific time. Conversation Live, Altadena Rising. Please keep us up to date and informed. If there are any things that you think that you're recording that we need to share on the podcast, feel free to send it over our way and keep us informed of what's going on.
Absolutely, Colby. Thank you so much for this platform and the work that you folks are doing over there at TV One, Radio One, Urban One, and all the ones, right? Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to Altadena After the Fire. If you found this episode meaningful, please share it to help spread awareness. Coming up on the next episode.
I read where there was $70 million given to the Pasadena Community Foundation, that $20 million went to nonprofits. I looked on the website at the nonprofits. Most I never heard of. Then they said that there was $50 million more that the Pasadena Community Foundation has, and they started a new organization in order to put that money out into the community. I have never heard of a nonprofit saying, I got money, now I'm going to start a new nonprofit to put money out.
To support those affected by the Eden Fire, consider donating to the Brotherhood Crusade's Wildfire Relief Fund at brotherhoodcrusade.org. Your contributions provide essential resources like food, medicine, and housing assistance to families in need. If you have updated information or a first-hand story to share, we'd love to hear from you. Contact details are in the show notes. Altadena After the Fire is an Urban One podcast. Executive producer and host, Colby Tyner. Assistant producer, Jahi Whitehead. Director of podcasting, Dre Smith. Special thanks to the Urban One Cares team and our founder, Kathy Hughes. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.